Hey, it's Brett, and this is Brett and Some Books. Today we're continuing The Plot to Seize the White House by Jules Archer. This is Chapter 12 of Part 2. Butler told a reporter for the Philadelphia North American, "Kendrick has his neck in a noose with me. If I fall or I am run out, he is going to go down also. If he reverses me just once, I'll quit, and the resignation will be in the form of a telephone call telling him I'm on my way back to Quantico and that the keys to my office are on my desk. I do not care whether the state laws or city ordinances are right or wrong. From January 7th, they are going to be enforced." He was not opposed to drinking in principle, he added. What was at stake was the enforcement of the law, pure and simple, not the ethics of prohibition. Even before he took office, Boss Vare sent an emissary to him, Judge Edwin O. Lewis, to offer Vare's suggestions for appointments in reorganizing the police department. None too politely, Butler made it clear that what Lewis and Vare could do with their suggestions. He rented a home in nearby Overbrook, but his wife and children seldom saw him there because he spent 7 days a week on the job, working until after midnight. Sworn in on January 7th, 1924, he took the oath of office in his Marine uniform, but half an hour later changed it for one of his own design. Blue with gold trim, it had a cape taken from the Marine mesh jacket with a flaring red lining. It was dramatic and impressive, and meant to be. He promptly summoned all police inspectors to his office. "I want the lieutenants in your 42 districts to clean up in 48 hours, he snapped, "or face immediate demotion. That is all." Then he visited each of the districts until he had spoken to every man on the force. The new motto, he announced, was short and sweet: "Clean up or get out." In his first week on the job, he raided and shut down 973 liquor and gambling joints without even warning Mayor Kendrick. Philadelphians were electrified. The police winked at each other, convinced that Butler was a smart grandstander who would make a big splash for the headlines and then quiet down and take it easy. Vare would see to that. Going night after night with only a few hours' sleep, he pressed his raids and inspections relentlessly. He demanded from his men a dedication and duty equal to his own, but many of them, cut off from their former sources of graft, were hostile and resistant to the new broom sweeping too clean. "Sherman was right about war," Butler signed wearily, "but he should have tried leading the Philadelphia police." Nevertheless, he began to show results. Worried Philadelphia bootleggers began unloading their stocks at cut prices. Many crooks and gamblers began streaming out of the city in search of more hospitable territory. Encouraging excessive zeal among his forces, Butler took responsibility for police who went too far on raids by using axes freely to destroy furniture and fixtures, searching private homes and vehicles on suspicion, and closing premises that had a right to stay open to sell non-intoxicating beverages. Magistrates soon began to issue search warrants to permit police to enter known speakeasies and masquerading as private residences. Many cases were dismissed on grounds of insufficient or illegal evidence. Butler realized he would have to modify his tactics and astonished Philadelphians by frankly confessing his mistakes to both the press and the police. "Guard against anything that will embarrass Mayor Kendrick's administration," he now ordered police. "Keep away from the hippodrome stuff. I must admit that I have sinned in this latter respect more than any of you, and the only excuse I have to offer is that I was unduly excited and enthusiastic." Such candor won the affection and respect of reporters, who found Butler colorful copy and loved to join him for midnight suppers on Chestnut Street. There was never any question he would not answer for them directly and honestly, but if they were for him, they were their publishers, with the exception of Philadelphia Record, were not. The editorial pages sought to ridicule and discredit him endlessly. They insisted on treating me like a queer animal from the circus, Butler related. My chance remarks were twisted and distorted to paint me in the worst light. About 50 of the minor officials and correspondents of the newspapers became my loyal friends, but they had no influence in shaping the editorial point of view. By March, angry Republican ward leaders were furious at Butler for disrupting their network of police control. They vigorously applauded City Treasurer Thomas J. Watson at a meeting when he shouted, "This country, as well as the Republican organization, would be a hell of a sight better off without Butler." The Philadelphia City Council closed ranks against him. My foolish notion that the laws of our country applied to the rich and poor alike accounted for the growing feeling of antipathy toward me, he recalled later, adding, by the end of 1924, I had been cussed, discussed, boycotted, lied about, lied to, strung up, and reviled. Several times I was on the point of resigning. The only reason why I continued in my unpopular and uncomfortable position was to see what the hell was going to happen next. Try as he might, he was unable to break the power of the ward bosses. In April, he was forced to admit that he'd been double-crossed by about half of his police lieutenants who had bowed to ward boss pressure to permit shuttered saloons, gambling houses, and speakeasies to reopen. Studying the structure, he found that every ward had one police station. The ward leader named captain of the station, and the police thus belonged to the ward leader. In an attempt to destroy the power of the ward bosses, Butler now cut the stations down from 46 to 33. Infuriated politicians, racketeers, and realtors, who hated him for having cost them the rents of 1,500 closed brothels, as well as the income from other illegally operated properties, joined forces to demand that Kendrick fire him. But nearly 5,000 church congregations adopted resolutions in July demanding that the mayor give full support to the general. Adding to this pressure were thousands of letters from women's clubs, civic groups, business organizations, and individuals. Kendrick, alarmed at being caught between the voters and the brokers of power, wavered back and forth. A report that he was preparing to knuckle under to the political bosses brought another roar of protest from the citizenry. A mass meeting of 4,000 Philadelphians resolved that Butler must be kept in office. Since General Butler has been in command here, more has been accomplished for the suppression of vice and crime than in any period of like duration in this city. They flooded the Secretary of Navy, Curtis D. Wilbur, with letters urging that Butler's leave of absence from the Marines be extended for another 3 years. President Calvin Coolidge reluctantly agreed to extend the general's leave for 1 more year, but he pointed out to the citizens of Philadelphia that the federal government could not continue indefinitely to be responsible for solutions to local problems. The practice of detailing officers of the United States military forces to serve in civil capacities in the different states on leaves of absence is of doubtful propriety and could be employed only in cases of emergency. Local government cannot be furnished from the outside. Reappointed by the end of the year, Butler had raided almost 4,000 speakeasies, shutting down 2,566, and had seized over 1,000 stills, arresting 10,000 violators of the Volstead Act. But to his dismay, political pressure in the court system resulted in only 2,000 indictments by the grand jury, with only 300 convictions. Police magistrates, who were handpicked by the politicians, imposed only token fines on all but 4% of arrested speakeasy operators. Struggling to get honest law enforcement, Butler complained to the press, was like submitting to Chinese water torture. Drops of water have been dripping on my head since I have been here. Either I am unpopular, or the enforcement of liquor laws is unpopular in this city. When the people of Philadelphia or any other city stop playing the game of enforce the law against others but not against me, they will begin to win the fight against lawlessness. He was bitter when he learned of a secret deal between the brewers of Philadelphia and the Republican State Campaign Committee. A royalty of $2 for each barrel of illegal beer distributed was to be paid to the Republican Campaign Fund, provided the politicians put the White House under heavy pressure to recall Butler on duty with Marines. Toward the end of 1925, whether this deal was responsible or not, Coolidge refused to extend Butler's leave. The general was ordered to report after the first of the year to command the Marine post at San Diego. With his recall assured, Mayor Kendrick now shrewdly sought to make points with pro-Butler voters by declaring that he wished it were possible for him to keep the general as director of public safety for the remainder of his own administration. A Keep Butler movement sprang up all over Philadelphia. Forced to go along with it, Kendrick told one mass meeting, "To announce that General Butler is to leave his post here would be tantamount to inviting any army of criminals to Philadelphia." But the mayor lost no time in grooming his successor. Meanwhile, Butler had become increasingly irked by the fact that the pressure of powerful hotels and the Hotel Association kept their ballroom social affairs, at which liquor was served to young teenage girls from socially prominent Philadelphia families, from being raided for liquor violations. Ordering a raid on a formal ball at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, he seized evidence showing that bootleg liquor was being served. Confronting Kendrick, he demanded that the mayor institute padlock proceedings against the Ritz-Carlton. "And I mean the whole hotel," he insisted. "Something must be done to teach these big fellows that they must obey the law as well as the little fellows." A howl of outrage was heard in the ranks of the Republican Party's wealthiest adherents. Republicans were threatened with the wholesale withdrawal of campaign contributions unless Butler was now unceremoniously dumped. Greatly upset, Kendrick urged him to lay off the big hotels. To the mayor's horror, Butler firmly announced his intention to organize a special police squad in evening clothes to invade all Philadelphia hotels and signal for raids whenever they found liquor law violations. His fighting spirit was now thoroughly aroused. Although he longed to get back to his beloved Marine Corps, it rankled him to leave a mission incomplete. If he left Philadelphia now, he would have enforced the law against small operators who bootlegged liquor to the poor, but not against the big operators who made it available to the rich. His egalitarian nature pressed him to balance the scales. He also felt an obligation to the honest cops who had defied the ward bosses to support his fight against corruption. Once he was gone, he feared they would all be punished for their loyalty to him. He decided that he owed it to them to sacrifice his career in the Marine Corps, to stay on and finish the job, especially since Kendrick had made it clear, or so Butler believed, that he needed and wanted him. The morning papers carried the story that Butler was resigning from the Marine Corps to remain as director of public safety. Appalled, the hotel owners of the city joined with local politicians in a demand that Kendrick fire Butler immediately. The mayor was reminded that the Hotel Association's cooperation with City Hall was absolutely essential for the success of a sesquicentennial celebration of American independence being planned for Philadelphia. Worried and upset, Kendrick called Butler to his office and told him, "I don't want any retired generals around me. You ought to go back to the service where you belong. The president doesn't want you here."